Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're wading into what, on the surface, looks like a standard trade dispute. Maybe an unpleasant one, but the sources we've gathered, they paint a picture that's far more complex and, frankly, far more dangerous.
It's genuinely alarming. I mean, it's astonishing we're even having this conversation.
Right, we're looking at a major systemic fracture in what has always been the world's most durable, most reliable economic relationship, the one between the United States and Canada.
Yeah, our analysis today, it's not about some usual squabble over tariffs. We're dissecting a situation where the U.S. has, well, seemingly decided to set fire to the essential economic bridge connecting it to its closest neighbor.
This isn't just policy, then.
No, it's a warning sign. It highlights how the Trump administration's confrontational approach has fundamentally shifted an ally into an adversary.
And to really understand the magnitude of this self-inflicted damage, you have to look at the scale of the relationship. We're talking about sheer volume here.
It's massive.
For context, just think about this. Canada buys more American manufactured goods than China, Japan, and the United Kingdom combined.
It's staggering. They're not some minor trading partner. They're the bedrock.
And yet, the administration is treating them like an enemy to be subdued, or a subject demanding submission.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack how that happened, how this, aggressive stance spiraled into not only massive disruption across North American supply chains,
But into a genuine U.S. constitutional crisis.
a constitutional crisis, a legal showdown testing the very limits of presidential power. On one side, you have this political belligerence driving the conflict.
And on the other.
You have figures like Mark Carney, former head of both the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, approaching it with what our sources call calm composure and a grounded sense of reality. It's political coercion thinly disguised as trade negotiation.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have to start with the immediate tangible consequence. The U.S. is threatening a massive 25% tariff on Canadian imports. This isn't academic, right?
Not at all.
The economic pain must be real and measurable right now. What are our sources telling us about the direct impact on ordinary Americans?
The sources make it undeniably clear that the pain is being felt across multiple sectors. And critically, it's all stemming from problems that, in the words of one source, never existed before this policy was enacted.
Problems they created themselves.
Precisely. Let's look at manufacturing first. The auto industry, it relies on this seamless cross-border flow. Auto plants in Michigan were immediately forced to slow or even halt production lines.
That sounds like a classic just-in-time supply chain disaster.
It is. I mean, some components cross the border multiple times before a car is even finished. So when tariffs, or even just the threat of tariffs, slows that down,
It all just grinds to a halt.
the disruption ripples instantly through the entire industrial Midwest. Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin. You can't just reroute an entire supply line for complex manufacturing overnight. When the parts stop, the workers stop.
Which means real wage loss and plant closures start to feel pretty imminent.
They do. And it's not just big manufacturing, right? We're talking about essential goods that affect you directly.
Like what?
Well, think about the housing market. It's already stretched so thin. Canadian lumber is essential for construction projects all across the U.S.
Okay.
When that supply stalled, partly because of the tariff threat, partly just regulatory uncertainty, housing prices in places like Arizona, the Mountain West, they immediately soared even higher.
So American builders are paying more to build fewer houses, all because of tariffs on their closest ally.
Exactly. Now let's move south. Florida. Florida's massive tourism industry is reeling. Canadians, the snowbirds, they're reliable, high-spending winter visitors.
Right, a huge part of their economy.
A huge part. As the rhetoric escalated and the trade war began, there was a sharp decline in that visitor flow. That cost hotels, restaurants, local businesses, significant revenue they depend on every single year.
So the slogan America First is resulting in, well, American pain?
Genuine, measurable economic pain for the American consumer, farmer, and manufacturer itself.
So if the cost is so high, economically and politically, what was the core standoff? What exactly did Canada do to provoke this level of fury?
The core standoff wasn't really about trade concessions. It was a demand for political submission.
Submission.
Yeah. Trump's team demanded that Ottawa accept Washington's ability to reimpose tariffs at will, meaning at any time, for any reason the U.S. decided, with no recourse or negotiation.
Wow. So that essentially strips Canada of any real sovereignty in the relationship?
That's why Mark Carney, their chief negotiator, refused. He was committed to the core principle that stable international trade needs rules. It needs binding commitments, predictable processes,
Yeah.
not arbitrary pressure.
Not the whims of one administration.
For him, abandoning that structure was just. It wasn't a negotiable point. It would permanently expose the Canadian economy to Washington's political cycle.
And it was that refusal to play the subordinate role that escalated everything so dramatically.
Dramatically. I mean, reports from late October 2025 indicated the depth of Donald Trump's anger. He apparently viewed Carney's refusal as a serious mistake.
And then came the accusation.
He went so far as to accuse Canada of behaving like a threat to U.S. national security.
Just think about that for a moment.
It's a grave inflammatory charge. It's usually reserved for nations like North Korea or Iran. He put America's closest, most reliable ally in the same box as genuine hostile actors.
And this is where the sources really connect the dots for you, the listener. This whole confrontation with Canada, this swift move from ally to adversary, it follows a distinct, highly predictable pattern we've seen before.
Yes.
It suggests the issue is less about trade strategy and more about requiring absolute personal submission.
That is the essential, crucial insight you get from the sources. Donald Trump's loyalty throughout his political career, it have never extended beyond his immediate self-interest. If an ally, whether that's an individual or a whole country, pushes back or stops serving his immediate needs, they are discarded without hesitation, often with public humiliation.
We've seen it play out again and again with people who were once his most loyal supporters.
Absolutely. And the shock here is applying that same pattern to a sovereign country. Think about Jeff Sessions.
The first senator to endorse him.
Exactly. He lent crucial legitimacy. But the moment he upheld the rule of law, recused himself from the Russia investigation, he was publicly shamed and forced out. Loyalty wasn't enough. Submission was required.
And we saw the same thing with William Barr, who was a devoted defender.
He instantly became a pariah, branded a traitor, all because he refused to seize voting machines or declare the 2020 election stolen. The shift from champion to enemy was instant. The sources describe it as a test,
A test of loyalty.
The second an individual chooses institutional loyalty to the law, the Constitution over personal loyalty to Trump, they become an obstacle.
And the most dramatic example of this was probably Mike Pence on January 6th.
For 4 years, unwavering loyalty. But the moment he chose the Constitution over political pressure, he instantly became a target for a mob incited by the man he had served.
So you take that history sessions, Barr, Pence, even Kevin McCarthy, and you apply that exact pattern to an entire nation.
The parallel is stunning. It's terrifying. The message is completely unmistakable. Trump seeks total submission, not genuine strategic alliances. When Canada refused to play that subordinate role,
It became an enemy.
regardless of proximity, it became an enemy in his worldview.
So what was the tactical move Carney made that finally sent Trump into a rage, as the sources put it?
Carney made the rational, self-protective move of any sovereign nation. He started actively looking for other trade partners to shield his economy.
He started diversifying.
He did. Canada expanded discussions with Pacific economies, intensified engagement with Europe, a deliberate strategic effort to lessen their dependence on a Washington that had become wholly unreliable.
And to Trump, that was the ultimate betrayal.
It was. In this zero-sum worldview, an ally seeking to protect its own national interest is seen not as a prudent partner, but as an act of calculated defiance. That refusal to remain vulnerable, that was the final straw.
So we've moved from political fury and economic disruption to a formal legal challenge. The crisis has now escalated into a constitutional showdown in the United States.
Absolutely. The confrontation is no longer just political rhetoric. It's a legal test of the separation of powers. On November 5th, 2025, a massive lawsuit was filed by a coalition of U.S. importing business associations against the administration.
And these aren't political groups, right? These are businesses.
Right. These are companies that need stability to operate. They need predictability.
And what's the specific legal charge they're making?
The charge is that Trump's use of a specific law exceeded his constitutional authority. The legal mechanism he used was the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the IEPA.
Okay, what does that act do?
It allows the president to regulate international commerce during a genuine national emergency.
But the business groups are arguing that a trade dispute with Canada doesn't qualify as a national emergency that warrants seizing such vast power.
Precisely. And their argument goes straight to the foundation of American governance. The Constitution itself. They're alleging that the IEPA was used illegally to impose what are effectively taxes tariffs. And the Constitution is very clear about who can do that.
Tell us more about that constitutional basis, because this is the bedrock of the whole case.
It centers on Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. This section gives Congress the exclusive power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises.
So tariffs are duties. That's Congress's job.
It's their job alone. The founders deliberately gave this power to the legislative branch, the one closest to the people, to ensure a balance of power. The lawsuit argues that if the president could just unilaterally impose massive tariffs by declaring an emergency, then he's usurping Congress's most fundamental authority.
Which explains why the Supreme Court fast-tracked the case. What's the urgency from their perspective?
Because every single day these tariffs remain in effect is another day the economic instability persists. It's another day American consumers are paying higher prices. This is being described as the most consequential legal challenge involving presidential tariff authority since the 1950s.
And what's fascinating here is that the alarm isn't just coming from political opponents. The sources show a bipartisan legal consensus forming.
That's the signal that this is a truly critical moment. You have figures across the ideological spectrum expressing deep concern. During oral arguments, even Justice Neil Gorsuch, a conservative voice, warned about the dangers of expanding executive authority through these vague claims of emergency.
And the conservative critics are even sharper in their language.
They are. George Conway, a prominent conservative critic of the administration, said that if the Supreme Court upholds these tariffs, the U.S. would effectively erase the boundaries between the three branches of government. It would turn the presidency into an economic king.
An economic king. That image from our sources really captures the systemic threat here.
And, maybe most significantly, you have Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor known for defending robust executive authority.
Right, in national security contexts.
Exactly. And even he acknowledged that invoking emergency powers for a mere trade dispute represents a step too far. So when lawyers who usually defend executive power agree it's being abused, it confirms this has gone way beyond trade policy. It's a fundamental warning about the fragility of the rule of law.
So let's pivot to the immediate political landscape. Beyond the courts, how is this confrontation shaping the 2026 midterm elections?
The political fallout is immediate and potentially devastating for the administration. Trump is facing fierce backlash because the tariffs have directly contributed to the rising cost of living in critical industrial swing states.
Michigan, Wisconsin.
States that were essential to his electoral success.
I can see manufacturers being upset, but what about farmers?
Farmers and agricultural producers are growing intensely anxious. They remember the pain of the 2018 trade war, the sudden loss of key export markets, the need for taxpayer-funded bailouts. They're terrified of a repeat.
And Ottawa isn't just sitting on its hands, right? They're playing politics, too.
They are. Canada is preparing highly targeted retaliatory tariffs aimed squarely at products from Republican-leaning states. Things like wine, bourbon, specific agricultural goods, all designed to ensure maximum political pain for the administration's core supporters.
It sounds like this trade war has created a serious rift within the Republican Party itself.
It has. Moderate Republicans tied to major industries, they understand the severe harm of a futile, self-destructive trade war. Steve Schmidt, a veteran Republican strategist, he openly condemned Trump's attacks on Canada as reckless, immoral, and foolish.
And for Democrats, this must be potent political material.
It's a political weapon they didn't have to manufacture. Democrats will relentlessly portray the administration as arrogant, willing to sacrifice the financial interests of American workers. And they have tangible evidence to point to.
You mean higher prices?
Rising prices at Home Depot for lumber,
Yeah.
higher costs for processed food at Walmart. The chaos is measurable right there at the checkout line.
Okay, let's zoom out.
Yeah.
The global implications. This is not just a domestic fight. It's a pivotal test of the global trading architecture itself.
It truly is. The entire international trading system, which has brought decades of unparalleled global stability and prosperity, it's all built on the principle of predictability, on rules and binding commitments. If the U.S., the world's largest economy, can just arbitrarily wield its economic power purely for domestic political reasons with no real consequences, that rules-based system is fundamentally undermined.
It tells other countries they can't rely on the U.S. as a partner.
Exactly. Trump's actions are compelling Canada and other international partners to chart a course forward without relying on the United States. They have to assume Washington is unreliable. It pushes the free world to organize itself outside of American influence.
And the most long-term chilling danger, as the sources point out, is the precedent this sets for future presidential power.
That is the ultimate concern. If a president can invoke the IEPA and emergency power to impose tariffs on Canadian maple syrup,
Right.
what stops a successor from declaring a domestic issue, an emergency, and punishing a domestic industry they disagree with, or even a specific state that votes against them? These precedents, once they're established, they become embedded in a new political reality that future administrations will exploit.
So what this all means for us, ultimately, the source material suggests we're in a core conflict about the future of Western governance. Do we want an order governed by the rule of law, by institutional checks?
Or a world dominated by the personal will of a single individual, behaving like what George Conway called a financial autocrat?
And the coming weeks are absolutely critical.
They are. The lawsuits are moving through the highest courts, and the next wave of economic data will expose the real costs of these policies. The Supreme Court decision will be the ultimate stress test of the Western democratic system itself,
It'll determine if the Constitution still applies in the economic sphere.
and whether the executive branch can simply govern by fiat.
And here is a final provocative thought for you to consider. The source material has shown us that Donald Trump's loyalty has never extended beyond himself, and now that personal pattern has been applied to an entire allied country. Think about the fragility of democracy itself. It rests entirely on the foundational belief that those in power will respect the law and the checks and balances, even when respecting them runs directly counter to their own political interests. When that trust collapses, the entire system begins to fracture, first economically and then constitutionally.